What is going on, Pretender here, back with another Honkai style guide, and today I'm here talking about why Acheron players should really consider Jiaoqiu. Now with Jiaoqiu's first rerun, I'm sure a lot of people already considered may have summoned, but there's a lot of people that are still on the fence on if they should actually get their Jiaoqiu for their Acheron, on if they should get Jiaoqiu for their Acheron. And so today I'm going to be going over Jiaoqiu and how he does work. I'm not going to be going over his kit directly, but I will be going over each part and highlighting his key details. And then I'll be talking about why he's so good for Acheron specifically, and then how it does kind of fare to, like, you know, signature light cone, further investment, and so on, and how Jiaoqiu also does just become so much stronger with vertical investment if you do consider that as well. There's so many memes going around about Acheron mains, you know, screaming at people and not getting Jiaoqiu. It's really funny, so I thought, you know, finally might make a video on it just explaining it. Before I get into the video, if you guys found the video helpful in any way, shape, or form, drop a good like, would be greatly appreciated. If you're new or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of style content and guides. And let's get straight into the video. So first, let's obviously talk about Jiaoqiu himself, as I did mention. What makes him this character that is just good to consider? So Jiaoqiu at his core is a general debuffer, similar to the other ones we already have in the game, such as Payla, Silverwolf, and so on. In his base kit, he does have access to two different debuffs to make enemies take more damage. One of them is from his talent, which is just general vulnerability, so any source of damage you do to the enemy that does have that vulnerability will take more damage. And then his zone, the ultimate, when you do activate the ultimate, it puts up a zone, and enemies within the ultimate, and it's not for whoever he just hits, it's actually for anyone that walks into the zone while it is active. Those enemies will actually take increased ultimate damage. So he has ultimate damage vulnerability. So his talent gives him a vulnerability that starts at 15% with his Ashen Roast, which you can inflict through his ultimate zone, applying to them, hitting them with a skill, basic attack. Just whenever you do hit an enemy, they get inflicted with that Ashen Roast stack. The first stack will make them take 15% more damage, and every stack after that will make them take 5% increased damage, which will stack up to 5 times for 2 turns. So you can get up to a 35% vulnerability at max on a single enemy. And the most interesting thing that sets him apart from other debuffers is his ability to actually activate a debuff on an enemy's turn. In the ultimate, whenever an enemy does act in Jiaoqiu's zone, so whenever he has his ultimate up, whenever they do act, they will get inflicted with an Ashen Roast stack. So that actually counts as putting a debuff on them when they do act. And so every Ashen Roast stack will increase the general vulnerability they do have, so it also applies to that as well. And then again, in the ultimate, they all take 15% increased ultimate damage. It's also super easy to set up Jiaoqiu. Practically the beginning of the battle, you can get a setup such as running him with Von Walk and such, to where he just skills once, puts up the ultimate, and now it's up, and it's very easy to cycle his ultimate, especially because his ultimate only has 100 energy cost. So you practically always have the zone up, and so enemies will practically permanently be taking Ashen Roast stacks on their turn. It does have a cap, so you have to refresh it after every 6 times it does proc. So enemies will always just be taking this increased ultimate damage. You're constantly applying vulnerability to enemies without actually needing to reapply anything, except until you do hit the full cap of the ultimate, which is 6. So that's how he does kind of function. That's his role as a general debuffer. Now for a brief section, I'll be talking about why he gets so much stronger with just quick vertical investments, so such as getting an E1 or S1. First, talking about his E1, it's very simple to understand. Pretty much any time someone is inflicted with Ashen Roast, that enemy does take 40% increased damage. So it's even more damage you're actually going to be able to inflict onto enemies. And on top of that, anytime you do inflict Ashen Roast on someone triggering his talent effect, they additionally get inflicted with another stack. So another stack you can apply anytime they do get inflicted by it via his talent ability, and also just making your team do 40% increased damage to enemies that do have that debuff. So that's just going to be great, not just for Acheron, but anyone you run him with. But since this video is set devised around Acheron, yes, it's going to make her do a lot more damage. And then when it comes to his S1, it makes him significantly easier to build because it gives him a 60% increase to effect hit rate. And it also gives him access to another debuff that makes enemies take increased damage. And you're actually able to upgrade that state that makes enemies take increased damage. So they start off taking 10% increased damage when you do inflict unarmored on them, which is the debuff in the light cone. And if that person with unarmored, it has also the dot state inflicted by the wearer, which he can do. Ashen Roast is being the same as considered as burn. You can upgrade unarmored to cornered state, which additionally will increase the damage to that enemy target by 14%. So another big damage increase you can do to enemies, since he's able to inflict unarmored on them, and then upgraded since Ashen Roast is also being considered as burned. So being easier to build and getting access to another really good debuff to make enemies take more damage. But now talking about why he is so good for Acheron. So first, I'm going to start it off with the absolute biggest reason. You remember when I was talking about the fact that he can actually apply debuffs on the enemy's turn? He is the only character that is able to do that in the game. You already know Acheron gains alt charges by getting debuffs inflicted onto enemies. So what does this mean? When an enemy does act, that gives Acheron a charge. The amount you can accelerate gaining alt charge on Acheron is absolutely absurd. Going from someone like Palo or Silverwolf, who can only apply a debuff whenever an enemy is attacked by them, to actually being able to apply a debuff on them whenever Jiaoqiu attacks, so that's a stack there, and also being able to generate stacks when the enemy attacks you. So the sheer amount of charges you can gain off enemies' turns is why he is so valuable. But on top of that, he is one of the only other characters that has the access to ultimate damage vulnerability in his ultimate. Other debuffers, so Nahodi debuffs, Pela has a defense shred, Silverwolf has a defense shred, Black Swan has a defense shred. There's a lot of defense shreds and such. And also, just making enemies take more damage vulnerability, which Jiaoqiu does as well. But none of them actually make Acheron do significantly more as opposed to Jiaoqiu giving ultimate vulnerability. Ultimate vulnerability will scale so much more with Acheron's ultimate because her ultimate is her main source of damage, so the fact that you're applying ultimate vulnerability does scale better than having general vulnerability or stuff like defense shred. So not only are you generating stacks on the enemy's turn, so you're able to ultimate faster, you're actually also being able to do more damage than you would compared to anyone else because ultimate vulnerability just scales better. So not only do you have access to a general vulnerability, which is going to increase any source of damage your Acheron does, so basic attack, skill, and also your ultimate, in Jiaoqiu's ultimate, which you practically permanently will have up, you also will be doing more damage with Acheron's ultimate because the ultimate vulnerability Jiaoqiu applies does just scale better. So you will be doing significantly more damage with him than you would with any other Nahodi character. So you combine the fact that you do more damage with the ultimate and you get ultimate faster, both getting more output and more damage at the same time, is why he is significantly better than any other Nahodi you can run with Acheron. Doesn't matter what kind of investment you have on Acheron, Jiaoqiu will always be the best Nahodi you can run with her. At E0 S0, Jiaoqiu is the best, E0 S1, Jiaoqiu is the best, E2 S1, and further on, Jiaoqiu is the best. No one is able to apply the debuffs on the enemy's turn like he can, so no one can actually gain ultimate for your Acheron as fast as he can, and he also has the access to the best debuffs you can do, thanks to the fact that he does have ultimate vulnerability. Combine this with ease of use, practically always having the ultimate up, and you just have this Acheron bot just actively just going at it at all times. So your Acheron will constantly have more output being done and more damage being done. Jiaoqiu is also one of the only characters that is actually worth getting over something like going vertical investment on Acheron. Acheron is one of the characters that definitely struggles one of the most without having a signature light cone, but Jiaoqiu honestly is so valuable to the point it's actually more worth to get him than her signature light cone. But then you also got to factor that you're playing a 50-50 versus a 75-25, so it's technically easier to go for the light cone, but all that stuff. Just going for Jiaoqiu is just so much more valuable. Again, it is easier to get her light cone, but Jiaoqiu definitely does technically provide more value because he can make you do more damage than you would. But having the light cone easier to get makes Acheron being built easier as well, so there's a whole kind of like thing there. But anything past that first sentiment is always just Jiaoqiu. So if you get S1 first, Jiaoqiu is definitely the next option you would do. And then if you get Jiaoqiu, then yeah, the light cone is the next one you would do. Just even at E0, S0 for Jiaoqiu specifically, you have the access to the general vulnerability in his talent, you have the ultimate vulnerability and being able to apply stacks on the enemy's turn in his ultimate, and you could very easily make him stronger by giving him access to something like a 4-star light cone that actually is going to give him defense shred 2, being the Pearl's light cone. So now on top of his vulnerability, ultimate vulnerability, and getting stacks on the enemy's turn, you now actually have defense shred with the resolution light cone. So with access to another debuff, and if you don't have that, you can literally just give him a stat stick and he's good to go. It's mainly his base kit is why he's so important. So that's another thing you can definitely consider if you're really on the iffy side of if you just want to go for E0 S0 on him. And another thing to consider in pure fiction specifically, Jiaoqiu is just so much better than everyone else just because his ultimate doesn't actually have to be reapplied technically. With Pela, you have to actually hit the enemy to have the defense shred, same with Silverwolf, same with Black Swan. For Jiaoqiu, you just have to have the ultimate up. The only problem with that is you need to run the solitary healing light cone to make sure you get enough energy to refresh the ultimate. Because the thing in pure fiction is you will have enemies attack too much to the point you will hit the 6 cap stack limit fast with Jiaoqiu's ultimate. Because it is ultimate, every time you do use it, you have a maximum of 6 Ashen Rose stacks that will apply on the enemy's turn, so you can get up to 6 charges for Acheron. You will run to that limit fast, so you do have to run solitary healing to make sure you get enough energy fast enough to constantly refresh the ultimate. If you run solitary healing, that is no longer an issue. So that's quite literally the only one issue he would have, which is not really an issue because it's solved by a free-to-play light cone that you can run temporarily. And now you have this ultimate genning zone where you just don't have to really reapply it besides just popping the ultimate every now and then. to refresh the duration, while everyone in that ultimate practically permanently will take 15% increased ultimate damage, and you don't have to actually hit the enemies for that debuff. Same thing with the vulnerability as Kit, because they just have to be inflicted with Ash and Roast, which is what his ultimate also does at the same time. So in MLC, Apocalyptic Shadow, and Pure Fiction, he is usually always the best case. Now for this last brief section, I'm going to talk about the one scenario where Xiaoqiu does fall off with Acheron a bit. And honestly, this is still negligible. He could still be better, and probably still is better in most cases. And that is just if the enemy barely attacks. If you're in a stage where the enemy will gain maybe 1 or 2 actions per cycle, that is where the whole idea of generating the stacks does fall off, because you won't generate as much. So in the future, if there's a really fast debuff applying the Hoodie character, they can potentially overtake him in that one case. But the reason I say it's pretty negligible is because of his actual debuffs he applies. Again, ultimate vulnerability mainly just being so goddamn important. That just makes Acheron do significantly more damage compared to anyone else. And then also having the debuffs that he does have for general vulnerability applied and very easy to use. So he still does have the ability to gain stacks for Acheron when he does attack, because he still can apply his debuffs when attacking. So it's still just like any other Nihoti character. So in that case, they don't really have a significant advantage over him. He still has the general vulnerability, the ultimate vulnerability. The only thing that falls off is the fact that he can't constantly generate stacks on the enemy's turn because they are barely attacking. That's still not really a thing where anyone would take a better slot than him right now. Only way it would is if in the future there's a character that also does ultimate vulnerability and they're super fast, or they have enough debuffs where you can constantly apply it without the enemy attacking. So when an enemy is not attacking as much, the debuffs on that character that attacks so much that you do have applying the debuffs constantly is super good, and is able to apply it on their turn instead, so you can technically generate more stacks, and that would be the only case. But right now we do not have that. Yep, that is the video. That is why Acheron players should really consider Xiaoqiu. He is a very, very, very powerful character for Acheron. He's also just a really nice general debuffer you can use. Not best in slot anywhere else, but he's still just a great slot, and he does his job everywhere, especially if you do get some vertical investment in him. But for Acheron specifically, he is a far and none the best by a long shot at that. As someone who used Acheron for a long time since her release, when Xiaoqiu came out, going from Black Swan / Silver Wolf / Pela to actually Xiaoqiu, I felt the difference instantly, and I've been feeling the difference from night and days till now. I've recently gone through trying the older Nihoti characters with Acheron again, and then trying it with Xiaoqiu, and yeah, Xiaoqiu is just, the difference is so goddamn apparent. Another thing is Xiaoqiu further future-proofs Acheron as opposed to any other Nihoti character, so that's another thing. But yeah, if you guys found this video helpful, again, drop a like, would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of Star content. Peace out.